So I was in IT for ever, not right out of high school, but did 2 years of college at Mercer County, or a year, I should say,
Okay.
and then got a job in computers
Where?
at a place called Clancy Paul. I was
Located where?
It was in. They were based in Princeton, but they had a location in. I guess it was Robbinsville, maybe, or
Okay.
Cranberry,
How
actually,
long did
Cranberry, New
you
Jersey.
do that for?
I was there for probably about 7 years when I got a better job at a bigger company. I became a service technician for the New Jersey, Philadelphia area, and then worked my way up to project manager to project troubleshooter, which just means I went around to different projects that my company would do around the country and fix them if they had gone awry. Um, so I did that for, gosh, I was there for 25 years.
Wow. Before you
Before I
got
got
married?
married, moved to Trenton, um, got laid off from that job, and started just doing IT stuff on my stuff, some consulting work, some service repair work, and then finally into websites. And then had gotten involved with volunteering at Artworks, which got me back to my roots as an artist. I went to Mercer County for advertising design, but really fell in love with art and photography, and kind of never fell out of love with either one of those things. And that just kindled my, that and being stuck home and not being able to buy things you couldn't when you originally have a transplant. You can't, for the first 3 or 4 months, they don't want you to go out in public because your immune system is very suppressed. So I would paint for my wife for presents. Like on our anniversary was around my transplant, and her birthday was coming up, so I would just paint. Um, and and when I said I think I want to go back to be an artist, but I'm going to be a photographer, so it was the painting that got me into photography. So,
Okay.
and that's the support that I was getting from Artworks, putting my stuff in Art All Day, photography in that, and Art All Night, things like that. So that's kind of what brought me back to art.
Okay. So you've been doing photography and art at
Right.
Artworks for
So,
how long?
so
Since
my transplant was 2011, and so somewhere in the middle of that year, 2011, I decided, I'm not going back. Probably like June of 2011, I told my wife, I'm not going back to work. I want to be an artist.
okay.
And
So it's been about 10
so it's been
years.
about 10 years. Yeah.
And now you're transitioning. Where do you see your work?
Well, I think from my work from being more contemporary or realistic, it's more abstract now, and more. I'm probably doing a little bit more with multimedia, and doing collaborations with other artists so that I can stretch my photography into being uh, just something different, just expanding, and not beyond just doing something with Photoshop.
Okay.
I wanted to physically manufacture, physically change my photography as opposed to doing it via, Photoshop or some type of a program. I'd rather wanted to manipulate it through either painting or ideas that other artists had, but still keeping it contemporary, and
Okay.
still the base is photography, but I consider myself a contemporary artist as opposed to just specifically a photographer.
Okay, so the work you've done so far, what have been some highlights? And like you've had your work featured. Where did you like you have had
Oh,
experience with other artists, but how did it really
I think
happen?
like
And what are some highlights?
highlight would be. I mean, I think you have. My first show was at Trenton Social. It's kind of a place that you kind of cut your teeth on, like as
Okay.
artists, and then you're doing coffee shops, and
Okay.
uh, you get into artworks thinking that's I'm in art all day, but that's anybody could be in art all day, not taking anything away from it, but it's a good experience to say, yeah, I
Okay.
can create art. But I think the first time the the big, like, oh my gosh, I'm an artist, was getting into the Ellerslie Open
Okay.
here, because that's a judge
In
and
Western?
yeah, because that's a judge show.
Okay.
Jur, some
Juried?
jury, or a somebody that's specifically does art as a career, um, picks your art, and they picked I think the piece called Malcolmless, which was a picture of another artist, Will Casso, who is now in Vermont. Um, it was it was something everybody went, wow, and that was like, oh, I got into like a show. And shortly thereafter, I got into another show with that same piece up in upstate New York in Woodstock at the WAM Museum, WAAM. And that was like, I think I was physically excited. Nobody was home that day when I found out that I had gotten in, but this is happening. That was like, this is happening moment. I'm getting into galleries outside of my town that people don't know me. People are appreciating me that don't know that I am Greg Shofed, the photographer in Trenton.
How do people discover your work?
I think mostly through Instagram and Facebook are, the main tools that people can catch me. But, I've been doing more shows across the country. I just got in a show in London. I've done some stuff in Glasgow now.
Wow, you're international.
So I guess I'm officially international, and I've sold stuff around. I got into there's a festival up in Toronto called the Contact Photo Festival, and it's something I've been trying to get into for a long time. And I got in last year with one of my collaborations, which with another artist who you met, Jane. And that piece that was here that lit up, that piece got into the show in Toronto, and that was another, there's another level of happening now, because it's about getting into bigger galleries and being recognized outside of just this area that has a wonderful artist community that supports you, but it's a small town, and you want to grow beyond that and have eyes look at Trenton for arts.
Has it been profitable for you?
Well, when I did quit, my wife told me, okay, you have 3 years to make money or you're going back to work. So I consider myself a working artist. At some point, with I guess my wife being my main investor, at some point I realized I wasn't asking. Probably about 4 years in, I was no longer asking my wife, oh, I'm in an exhibit, can you help me with this? The art was paying for itself.
Okay.
And so at that point, I guess like any entrepreneur or business, that's where they say, at least for restaurants, I guess, 4 or 5 years is when you start making money, generate a profit, and that's kind of when it happened for me. I was able to take my wife out to dinner and pay for other things for myself and take on some of the bills from home. So.
Yes. So help me understand the abstract art a little better, like where you're heading now, like
Well, I mean, it's funny. My photography is always based in maybe quiet urban moments. In Trenton, there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of industry that has obviously left the city. So there's all these buildings that you can see where the nature is taking over, or the construction, or they're being deconstructed. And so I'd always take pictures of stuff like that I found beautiful, like the flowers coming out of these buildings, or trees taking over those things, and how colorful some of those things are. So I try to focus on that as my template to create this beauty.
Okay, so now that you have the picture, now you're going to use oil or some type of paint, something to...
If I'm using a collaborator like Jane, she used collage, and she painted. So what we would do is, in order for us to be able to manipulate my photography, I printed the photo on glass, on a 30 by 40 piece of clear glass, so that we could manipulate using paints. She uses acrylics and collage. Sometimes what I'll do to kind of just make it more abstract is to set my camera to oversaturate a picture, or take a picture of something that's being manipulated through glass or through a puddle, something that distorts the picture a little bit, but just so that you're really concentrating on the color of it as opposed to the shape of it. But it's still the same subject, it's just manipulated by nature in a different way, or by some of the settings in my camera. I'm just using I'm using the full breadth of my camera to kind of change it, and then working with another artist to have their idea of what they see painted on that picture.
Okay. So the collage, what is that like? What's the collage about?
So in the case of Daylight 5, which I worked on with Jane Samos,
Mm-hmm.
what we did was we just actually took that same photograph and printed it on paper, and then cut it, and she cut it up and used that same photograph in the photograph. So
Okay.
she probably, what I consider, echoed the piece in the piece because it was clear. She just went through the back of the piece and pasted collage on the back. So when you look through the front, you see the collage through
Okay.
the clear glass and through the opaqueness of my original photography piece. And then she would kind of paint accents on that piece.
Okay, and that's referred to as collage
Yeah.
because you're reusing
Yeah, so
something.
collage is basically just putting a bunch of different pictures together and
Okay.
telling a story.
Kind of like
Yeah.
collage in Photoshop.
Yeah,
Also.
exactly.
Okay, so glass types. What types of glass do you use? Do you have
I work with a printer in South Jersey who does, if I ask him to print a banana, he would do that for me.
okay.
But, so I was trying to figure out, I like the vividness that glass does, but I wanted, most printers will put down a white canvas type and then print the image on top of that. And the
Okay.
glass kind of, the sheen of the glass makes the color bright. But what I wanted to do was not do that. I wanted to be able to see through it.
Okay.
So what I did is just print it on clear tempered glass,
Okay.
and then I'll use other pieces of my photographs on different types of surfaces, and then paste it or frame it into the glass. So we're changing the image by layering different images because it's all see-through.
Okay.
So again, it's just trying to change the photography. Instead of using Photoshop again, we're using manufacturing. I'm just manufacturing it all together. What Jane and I created was
So you're buying materials?
yes. So
though?
yeah. So it's
Okay.
we're manufacturing and we're buying the different materials. She bought
Okay.
a light box to put behind it to project the light through it, but there's several layers of art created on top of the original piece of art.
Okay.
So we're basically using manufacturing techniques as opposed to using electronic means to manipulate a photo.
Okay, and that is what you consider abstract.
Abstract, yeah,
now?
and
Okay.
it'll make the photo abstract. So you don't, until we tell you what it is, you probably don't know what it is, and then you see
Okay.
it.
Okay. Okay. So how do you enjoy what you do now? Your growth and what's in it for you apart from paying your bills?
There's a joy.
Okay.
It's something I like to do. It's not. It is a job, but it's not work because I enjoy it.
Okay.
I mean, there's the old cliche: if you like what you do, it's not a job.
Yeah.
And I really love what I do. It gives me. It's art is very social. It can be solitary,
Okay.
but when you're presenting it to the world, it's a social thing. So you get to enjoy the expressions, how everybody interprets your work. Because the minute you create your work,
Yeah.
it's no longer yours. It's whoever sees it. So to see the joy of other people looking at your artwork,
Yeah.
that's some of the happiest moments. And to see somebody physically happy by looking at your stuff, or it reminds them of something.
Do you remember a moment when somebody told you something they see in it that you didn't see yourself, or?
Yeah, I mean, early on I did a show over at the Ewing Public Library, and so this this woman had bought a piece because she was moving across the country, and she remembered I took a piece somewhere in Trenton. I can't even tell you what building I took, but she saw. I remember that when I was young, and it just brought her back, and she ended up buying the piece to take with her. She took a piece of home with her to, I guess I'm going to say, Arizona, because that's where she was retiring to, and that was
Okay.
her connection.
And you
Was
had no idea. that was-
I was just taking the picture because it was a pretty picture to my eye, but for her it was a childhood memory. That's a cool thing for somebody to pick up something and make it personal for themselves.
Okay.
That was a joy.
Okay.
Anytime you get some type of a physical reaction